In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a stolen church chalice and a brutal attack on young Emily spark a mystery that only Miss Jane Marple can unravel. With her sharp eyes and quiet smile, Miss Marple digs into whispers of missing money, a vicar's dark past, and a stranger's sneaky hunt for truth. From cryptic notes to a hidden ledger in the church crypt, she uncovers a scandal of greed and betrayal. Churchwarden Mr. Hargrove's theft, a secret child seeking revenge, and an old affair that haunts the village. Will Miss Marple trap the culprit and restore peace before another attack strikes? Dive into this cosy, twisty tale of secrets and justice. Chapter 1. The Quiet of St. Mary Mead. The morning sun spilled through the stained glass windows of St. Mary Mead's little church, painting the stone floor with patches of red and blue. Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual pew, near the back, where she could see everyone without being noticed. Her black hat, neat and plain, bobbed slightly as she tilted her head to watch the congregation. She held her prayer book, but her sharp blue eyes weren't on the pages. They darted from face to face, catching the small things others missed. A nervous glance, a tight smile, a fidgeting hand. It was Sunday, and the church was full. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax, with a hint of lavender from the flowers by the altar. Reverend Clements, a thin man with grey hair, stood at the pulpit. His voice wobbled as he spoke about forgiveness, his hands gripping the edges of the lectern a bit too hard. Miss Marple noticed. She always noticed. Something was wrong, she thought, like a stitch out of place in her knitting. The vicar's words were kind, but his eyes were worried, flicking toward the front row where the churchwarden, Mr. Hargrove, sat stiffly. Mr. Hargrove was a big man, with a red face and a loud laugh he used too often. He wore a suit that looked expensive but didn't quite fit, as if he'd borrowed it from someone richer. Next to him sat Emily, the vicar's niece, a young woman with pale skin and dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Emily's hands twisted in her lap, and she kept her eyes down, not singing the hymns. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Emily wasn't herself today. Usually she was bright, helping with the church flowers or chatting with the children. Today she looked like a mouse caught in a trap. The service ended, and the congregation spilled out onto the church lawn for tea. Miss Marple moved slowly, her stick tapping the ground, but her ears were sharp. She heard Mrs. Price, the baker's wife, whispering to Mrs. Bantry, her best friend. "They say the church fund's short," Mrs. Price said, her voice low. "Money's gone missing, and no one knows where. And that stranger, Mr. Lyle, was it? He's been poking around the vicarage. Odd, don't you think?" Mrs. Bantry, a jolly woman with a loud voice, nodded. "Very odd. And poor Reverend Clements looks like he hasn't slept in days. Something's brewing, mark my words." She spotted Miss Marple and waved. "Jane, come have a cuppa. We're just talking about the goings-on." Miss Marple smiled, her face soft and grandmotherly, but her mind was already turning. Missing money, a stranger, and the vicar's worried eyes. It was like the start of one of her puzzles, the kind she solved by watching people and remembering how they worked, greedy, kind or scared, just like folks she'd known all her life in St. Mary Mead. She took a cup of tea from Mrs. Bantry and settled on a bench under the yew tree. The village was quiet, with its tidy cottages and green hills, But Miss Marple knew quiet places hid the biggest secrets. She sipped her tea and listened as the gossip swirled. Mrs. Price leaned close, her eyes wide. "They say Mr. Hargrove's been handling the church fund, but he's not saying much. And Emily, well, she's been acting strange, hasn't she? Always at the church, poking about." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Young people do get restless," she said, but her mind was elsewhere. She remembered a time, years ago, when a churchwarden in a nearby village had borrowed from the collection plate. He'd been a loud man, too, like Mr. Hargrove, always smiling to hide something. She glanced at Emily, who stood alone by the church door, her face pale. Something was troubling that girl, and Miss Marple meant to find out what. The vicar joined them, his smile thin. "A lovely service, wasn't it?" he said, but his voice was too bright, like a cracked bell. Miss Marple tilted her head. "Very moving, Reverend," she said. "Your sermon on forgiveness, quite heartfelt. Is everything all right?" Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharp, like needles. Reverend Clements blinked, his hands fumbling with his teacup. "Oh, yes, just a busy week. Church matters, you know." He excused himself quickly and hurried back to the vicarage. Miss Marple watched him go, noting the way his shoulders hunched, as if carrying a heavy load. Mrs. Bantry leaned over. "He's not himself, Jane. I've known him for years, and he's never been so jumpy. Do you think it's the money business?" Miss Marple sipped her tea. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps it's something else. People do get upset over all sorts of things." She didn't say more, but her mind was busy, piecing together the bits. Reverend Clements's nerves, Emily's silence, Mr. Hargrove's loud laugh, and that stranger, Mr. Lyle. She hadn't seen him today, but Mrs. Price's words stuck with her. A stranger poking around the vicarage? That was worth looking into. As the tea party broke up, Miss Marple walked back to the church to collect her shawl. The building was empty now, the air cool and still. She moved toward her pew, her steps slow, but her eyes scanned the room. Something caught her attention. A small scrap of paper under the front pew where Mr. Hargrove had sat. She bent down, her joints creaking, and picked it up. It was a torn piece of a letter, with just a few words in spiky handwriting. "Must stop. Church. Secret." Miss Marple tucked the paper into her handbag, her heart beating a little faster. A secret, she thought. The church was old, full of corners and shadows, and secrets had a way of hiding in such places. She remembered a story from her childhood about a vicar who'd hidden love letters in a church wall, thinking no one would find them. But someone always did. Outside, she saw Emily hurrying across the lawn, her head down. Miss Marple called out, "Emily, dear, are you quite well?" The girl stopped, her eyes wide, like a deer startled by a noise. "Oh, Miss Marple, I'm fine," she stammered. "Just tired." Miss Marple smiled kindly. "You mustn't overdo it, dear. Helping with the church is good, but you need rest." She watched Emily's face, seeing the flicker of fear. The girl nodded and scurried off, her footsteps quick, on the gravel path. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. She didn't knit, though. She stared at the flames, her mind working. The church fund, the stranger, the vicar's nerves, Emily's fear, and that scrap of paper. It was a puzzle, all right. She thought of Mrs. Bantry's words. Something's brewing. Miss Marple agreed, and she was going to find out what. She opened her handbag and took out the scrap of paper, smoothing it on her knee. The words were faint, but they told her something was wrong, something bigger than a few missing pounds from the church fund. She thought of Mr. Hargrove with his too loud laugh, and Reverend Clements with his worried eyes. And Emily, poor Emily, caught in the middle of it all. Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her knitting needles. She didn't like secrets that hurt people, and she was very good at finding them out. The clock ticked on the mantel, and the fire crackled. Miss Marple's cottage was cosy, with its lace curtains and old teapot, but her mind was far from cosy. It was sharp, like a knife cutting through fog. She thought of the church, with its quiet pews and hidden corners. Tomorrow she'd go back. She'd talk to Emily, maybe visit the vicarage, and keep an eye on Mr. Hargrove. And that stranger, Mr. Lyle, she'd find out about him too. Miss Marple leaned back in her chair, her eyes half closed. The village thought she was just a sweet old lady, knitting and gossiping. But she knew better. She knew how people worked, how they lied, how they hid, how they broke. And she knew a scandal when she smelled one. The church was hiding something, and Miss Jane Marple was going to uncover it. She picked up her knitting, her fingers moving smoothly. The needles clicked, steady and sure, like the pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Tomorrow she'd start asking questions. Not big ones, just little ones, the kind nobody noticed until it was too late. She smiled to herself. The scandalous secret, whatever it was, wouldn't stay secret for long. Chapter 2. The Shadow in the Chancel. The next morning Miss Jane Marple walked to St. Mary Mead's church, her black shoes crunching on the gravel path. The air was cool, with a hint of damp from last night's rain. Her stick tapped steadily, but her eyes were busy, scanning the churchyard. The old yew trees stood dark and silent, their branches heavy, as if they knew something the village didn't. Miss Marple's mind was on yesterday's tea party. The whispers about missing money, the vicar's nervous hands, and that scrap of paper in her handbag with its talk of a secret. She meant to find out more today, starting with the church flowers. Arranging them gave her a reason to linger, to watch, to listen. Inside, the church was quiet, the pews empty. Sunlight slanted through the stained glass windows, casting coloured shadows on the stone floor. The altar gleamed, its silver candlesticks polished bright. Miss Marple set her basket of roses on a table near the chancel, the raised area by the altar where the vicar preached. She hummed softly, her fingers trimming stems, but her ears were sharp. Churches, she thought, were like people, calm on the outside, but full of hidden corners. She was halfway through her roses when she heard voices, low and sharp, coming from the vestry, a small room off the chancel where the vicar kept his robes. Miss Marple paused, her scissors still. She recognised Mr. Hargrove's loud, gruff tone and a softer voice. Emily, the vicar's niece. They were arguing, their words muffled but urgent. Miss Marple stepped closer, her movements slow, as if she were just adjusting a flower. She caught snatches of their talk. You can't keep it hidden forever, Emily said, her voice trembling. It's wrong, and it'll ruin everything, the church, uncle, all of it. Mind your place, girl, Mr. Hargrove snapped. You don't know what you're meddling with. Keep quiet or you'll regret it." Miss Marple's lips tightened. She didn't like Mr. Hargrove's tone, hard and mean, like a bully in a schoolyard. She remembered a man like him years ago, who'd shouted to hide his own guilt. Dimplesen said something else, too soft to hear, and then footsteps echoed, Mr. Hargrove's heavy boots stomping out. The vestry door creaked, and Miss Marple busied herself with her flowers, her face calm. Mr. Hargrove passed her, his red face redder than usual, and muttered a quick, "Morning, Miss Marple," before hurrying out at the church door. Miss Marple watched him go, her mind turning. What was Emily hiding? And why was Mr. Hargrove so angry? She glanced at the vestry, but Emily didn't come out. Miss Marple decided to wait. She trimmed another rose, her hands steady, but her heart beat faster. Something was wrong, and she felt it like a chill in the air. She finished the flowers and sat in a pew, her prayer book open as a pretense. The church was still but not peaceful. Miss Marple's eyes moved to the altar, where the silver chalice stood, old and heavy, used for communion. It was the church's pride, donated by a rich family long ago. She thought of the missing church fund. Money and silver. Both could make people greedy, she knew. She'd seen it before, in St. Mary Mead and beyond. The day passed quietly, and Miss Marple went home for lunch, but she couldn't settle. She kept thinking of Emily's trembling voice and that scrap of paper. After tea, she decided to return to the church. The vicar had asked for volunteers to tidy up before tomorrow's service, and Miss Marple never missed a chance to be useful, and to notice things. She arrived just as the sun was setting, the sky pink and gold behind the church tower. The church door was ajar, which was odd. Miss Marple frowned and stepped inside, her stick tapping softly. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. She called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" No answer, just the echo of her voice. She moved toward the chancel, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The candlesticks were still there, but the chalice was gone. Miss Marple's breath caught. Stolen, she thought, her mind racing. She turned to check the vestry, but then she saw something that made her heart stop. Emily lay crumpled on the chancel steps, her dark hair loose, her face pale as chalk. A trickle of blood ran from her temple, and in her hand was a crumpled note. Miss Marple knelt, her joints creaking, and touched Emily's wrist. The girl's pulse was faint, but there. "Oh, my dear," Miss Marple whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. She looked around, but the church was empty. The thief or attacker gone. Miss Marple hurried to the vicarage, her stick forgotten in her hand. She knocked hard, and Reverend Clements opened the door, his face pale. "Miss Marple, what's wrong?" "Emily's hurt," she said, her words quick. "In the church. Send for Dr. Haydock and Inspector Slack, now." The vicar gasped and ran to the telephone, his hands shaking. Miss Marple returned to Emily, wrapping her own shawl around the girl to keep her warm. She looked at the note in Emily's hand, careful not to move it. The writing was smudged, but she could make out a few words. Chalice, crypt, truth. Miss Marple's mind worked fast. The chalice stolen, Emily attacked, and another note about a secret. This wasn't just a theft. It was something darker, tied to the church and its people. She thought of Mr. Hargrove's angry words, the vicar's worried eyes, And that stranger, Mr. Lyle, who'd been poking around, was one of them behind this? Or someone else, hiding in plain sight? Dr. Haydock arrived first, his bag in hand. He was a gruff man but kind, and he knelt by Emily, checking her pulse. "Nasty bump," he said. "She'll live, but she needs rest." "What happened here, Miss Marple?" "I don't know yet," she said, her voice soft. "But I mean to find out." Inspector Slack came next, his boots loud on the stone floor. He was a young policeman, always in a hurry, and he didn't like Miss Marple's meddling. But she didn't care. She told him about the chalice and Emily, keeping the note's words to herself for now. She wanted to think first. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong," Slack said, scribbling in his notebook. "I'll have my men search the churchyard, and I'll question the vicar and that churchwarden. Hargrove, is it?" Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Yes, do that," she said, but her mind was elsewhere. A robbery? Maybe. But Emily's attack felt personal, and the note hinted at something deeper. She thought of the crypt, mentioned in the note. The church had an old crypt, rarely used, full of dusty tombs. Was something hidden there? She'd find out, but not tonight. Emily was carried to the vicarage, where Dr. Haydock stayed to watch her. Miss Marple walked home, the note's words turning in her head. Chalice, crypt, truth. She thought of Mr. Hargrove's red face, his threat to Emily, and the vicar. Did he know more than he let on? She remembered a case years ago, in a village near St. Mary Mead, where a stolen church relic hid a bigger crime. Was this the same? At her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. She didn't knit, though. She stared at the flames piecing together the day. Emily's argument, the stolen chalice, the attack, the note. She took out the scrap of paper from yesterday, comparing it to the note in her memory. The handwriting looked different, but the talk of secrets was the same. 2 notes, 2 clues, 1 puzzle. She thought of St. Mary Mead, so quiet and pretty, but full of secrets like any village. People hid things, greed, shame, fear. Miss Marple knew that better than anyone. She'd seen it in her neighbours, her friends, even herself, long ago. But she also knew how to find those secrets, with a kind word, a sharp eye, and a bit of patience. Tomorrow she'd visit Emily, if the girl was awake. She'd talk to Mrs. Bantry, who always heard the best gossip. And she'd watch Mr. Hargrove and the vicar, maybe even find that Mr. Lyle. The church was at the heart of this, she was sure. Its old stones held the truth, and Miss Marple was going to dig it out. She picked up her knitting, her fingers moving slowly. The needles clicked like a clock counting down. The scandal was growing, and someone in St. Mary Mead was scared. Miss Marple smiled just a little. She wasn't scared. She was curious, and that was much more dangerous. Chapter 3. The Village Whispers. Miss Jane Marple woke early, the soft light of dawn slipping through her cottage curtains. She sat by her window, sipping tea, her mind buzzing like a bee in a garden. Last night's events at the church, the stolen silver chalice, poor Emily lying hurt on the chancel steps, that crumpled note with its talk of crypt and truth, kept her awake longer than usual. Her knitting lay untouched in its basket, a sure sign she was puzzling over something big. Today She'd dig deeper into St. Mary Mead's secrets, starting with her friend Mrs. Bantry, who always knew the village's juiciest gossip. She dressed in her neat black coat and hat, grabbed her stick, and walked to Doolittle Hall, the Bantry's big house at the edge of the village. The air was crisp, smelling of wet grass and wood smoke. St. Mary Mead looked peaceful, with its tidy cottages and sleepy lanes, but Miss Marple knew better. Trouble hid in quiet places, like dust under a rug. She thought of Emily, safe now at the vicarage under Dr. Haydock's care, and Mr. Hargrove's angry words in the vestry. And that stranger, Mr. Lyle, where was he in all this? Mrs. Bantry welcomed her with a warm smile and a pot of strong tea in the sunny parlour. "Jane, you look like you're on a mission," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Is it about poor Emily? The whole village is talking about the church. A theft and an attack right under our noses." Miss Marple nodded, her face soft but her eyes sharp. "It's dreadful, Dolly. I saw Emily myself, lying there. And the chalice gone. Such a shock. What are people saying?" She sipped her tea, letting Mrs. Bantry spill the news like a tipped teapot. Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her voice low. "Well, they say the church fund's been short for months. Mr. Hargrove's in charge of it, but he's dodging questions. And Reverend Clements, poor man, he looks like a ghost. Did you know he had trouble years ago in London? Something about a parishioner who vanished, and money went missing too. It was hushed up, but folk remember." Miss Marple's lips pursed. A vicar with a past? That was new, but not surprising. People carried their mistakes like heavy bags, she thought. And Reverend Clements's worried eyes made sense now. She remembered a curate in St. Mary Mead, long ago, who'd left suddenly after a misunderstanding about donations. "Interesting," she said. "And what about Mr. Lyle, the stranger?" Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened. "Oh, him! He's staying at the Blue Boar Inn. Keeps to himself. But Mrs. Price saw him near the church late one night, looking at the windows. Says he's a writer, studying old churches, but I don't buy it. He's too sneaky, like a fox in a henhouse." Miss Marple tucked that away, her mind clicking like her knitting needles. A stranger snooping at night. He might be tied to the chalice or something else. She thought of the note in Emily's hand. Crypt, truth. Was Mr. Lyle hunting something hidden in the church? She'd have to meet him soon, maybe over tea. People talked when they felt safe, and Miss Marple was very good at making them feel safe. Mrs. Bantry kept chatting, but Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to Emily. The girl's fear, her argument with Mr. Hargrove, the note, it all pointed to a secret bigger than a stolen chalice. She recalled the scrap of paper from Sunday, with its talk of a church secret. 2 notes, 2 clues, 1 puzzle. She needed to see Emily, but first there was the church fundraiser this afternoon. The whole village would be there, a perfect chance to watch and listen. She thanked Mrs. Bantry and headed to the church hall, where tables were set with cakes and jars of jam. The fundraiser was to fix the church roof, but today it felt tense, like a storm brewing. Villagers milled about, their voices low, their eyes darting to Reverend Clements, who stood by the door, his smile thin. Mr. Hargrove was there too, laughing too loudly, his red face shiny with sweat. Miss Marple settled in a corner with a cup of tea, her prayer book open, but her eyes missed nothing. She watched Mr. Hargrove hand out raffle tickets, his big hands clumsy. He joked with Mrs. Price, but his eyes flicked to the door, as if expecting someone. Miss Marple thought of his threat to Emily. "Keep quiet, or you'll regret it." Was he scared she'd tell about the missing money? Or was it something worse? She remembered a shopkeeper once, loud like Mr. Hargrove, who'd stolen from his own till and blamed a boy. Loud men, she thought, often hid big lies. Reverend Clements moved through the crowd, shaking hands, but his face was pale, his eyes tired. Miss Marple felt a pang of pity. He was a good man, she believed, but good men could make bad choices. That London story, money and a missing person, nagged at her. Was he hiding something to protect the church? Or himself? She'd ask him later, gently, over a hymn book or a flower arrangement. Then she saw Mr. Lyle. He stood by the cake table, a slim man with dark hair and sharp eyes, dressed in a grey coat too fine for St. Mary Mead. He didn't eat or talk, just watched, his gaze lingering on the vicar, then Mr. Hargrove. Miss Marple tilted her head. He moved like a cat, quiet and careful. She thought of Mrs. Bantry's words, sneaky, like a fox. What was he after? The chalice or the secret Emily knew? Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind spinning. She noticed Emily wasn't there, likely still resting at the vicarage. She'd visit her tomorrow, if Dr. Haydock allowed. For now, she watched the fundraiser, catching snatches of talk. Mrs. Price whispered to a friend about Emily poking around the church. A farmer muttered about Mr. Hargrove's new car. Too fancy for a churchwarden. And a girl giggled about seeing Mr. Lyle with a notebook, sketching the church tower. The afternoon dragged on, and Miss Marple's legs ached, but she stayed, her eyes sharp. Near the end, she saw Mr. Hargrove slip out the back door, his face tight. Curious, she thought. She waited a moment, then followed, her stick tapping softly. Outside, the churchyard was dim, the sun low. She saw Mr. Hargrove by the yew trees, talking to a man she didn't know, a rough-looking fellow in a cap, his voice low. They stopped when they saw her, and Mr. Hargrove called out, "Evening, Miss Marple, just checking the grounds." She smiled, her face sweet. "Very kind of you, Mr. Hargrove, such a lovely evening." She turned back, but her heart beat fast. Who was that man? A friend, or someone tied to the theft? She thought of the chalice, gone from the altar, and Emily's note about the crypt. Was Mr. Hargrove hiding something there? Back inside, the fundraiser was winding down. Miss Marple bought a jar of jam and chatted with Mrs. Price, steering the talk to Mr. Lyle. "He seems keen on our church," she said, her tone light. Mrs. Price nodded, eager to gossip. "Oh, yes, says he's writing a book, but I saw him looking at the crypt door yesterday. Odd place for a writer, don't you think?" Miss Marple's eyes flickered. The crypt again. She thanked Mrs. Price and left, her mind full. At home, she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap, but she didn't knit. She thought of the day. Mrs. Bantry's gossip, the vicar's past, Mr. Lyle's sneaky ways, Mr. Hargrove's secret meeting. And Emily, hurt and scared, holding a note about truth. She took out the scrap of paper from Sunday, smoothing it on her knee. Must stop. Church. Secret. She compared it to the note in Emily's hand, in her memory. Chalice, crypt, truth. Different writing, same trouble. The church was the key, she was sure. Its old stones, its dark crypt, held something someone wanted hidden. Money? A crime? Or something worse? Miss Marple thought of St. Mary Mead, so small and quiet, but full of shadows. She knew people, how they lied, how they hurt, how they hid. She'd seen it in her neighbours, her friends, even her own heart, long ago. But she also knew how to find the truth with a kind word, a quick glance, a bit of waiting. Tomorrow she'd see Emily, if she was awake. She'd talk to the vicar, maybe ask about that London trouble. And Mr. Lyle, she'd invite him for tea, make him talk. Mr. Hargrove, too, needed watching, especially after that meeting in the churchyard. The puzzle was growing, and Miss Marple was close to a piece that would make it clear. She picked up, her knitting, her fingers slow. The needles clicked like footsteps in a quiet church. The secret was there, waiting, and Miss Marple, with her soft voice and sharp mind, was coming for it. Chapter 4. The Clue of the Torn. Hymnal Miss. Jane Marple woke with the sun, her mind already weaving through the puzzle of St. Mary Mead's church. The stolen chalice, Emily's attack, the cryptic note in her hand, and the whispers of missing money kept her thoughts busy, like threads in her knitting. She sipped her morning tea, staring out her cottage window at the quiet village. The church tower stood tall against the grey sky, its old stones hiding secrets she meant to find. Today, she'd visit Emily at the vicarage and return to the church to look for clues. Something was waiting there. She felt it, like a loose stitch in a sweater. She dressed in her black coat and hat, grabbed her stick, and walked to the church first. The air was chilly, with a damp smell of leaves and earth. The churchyard was empty, the yew trees dark and still. Miss Marple pushed open the heavy church door, her shoes soft on the stone floor. Inside, the air was cool, smelling of wax and old books. The altar looked bare without the silver chalice, and the chancel steps, where Emily had lain, were clean now. But the memory made Miss Marple's lips tighten. She sat in her usual pew, her prayer book open, but her eyes roamed. She thought of the note in Emily's hand. Chalice, crypt, truth, and the scrap from Sunday, with its talk of a church secret. 2 notes, 1 mystery. She needed more, something solid. Her gaze fell on a hymnal in the pew rack, its cover worn. It looked odd, tilted, as if someone had shoved it back in a hurry. Curious, she pulled it out. A page was torn, half missing, and in the margin someone had scribbled in pencil, a jumble of letters, HV 312. Miss Marple's heart skipped. A code, she thought. She tucked the hymnal under her arm, her mind racing. She remembered a boy in St. Mary Mead, years ago, who'd hidden messages in books to cheat on tests. Codes meant secrets, and secrets meant trouble. She checked the other hymnals, but found nothing. This one was special, left by someone careless or scared. She'd show it to her nephew, Raymond West, who was visiting soon. He was clever with puzzles, even if he thought his old aunt was just a sweet knitter. She left the church and walked to the vicarage, a grey stone house next to the churchyard. Reverend Clements opened the door, his face pale, his eyes tired. "Miss Marple, how kind," he said, his voice thin. "Emily's awake but weak. Dr. Haydock says she can have visitors, but not for long." Miss Marple smiled, her face gentle. "I won't tire her, Reverend. I just want to see how she's doing." She followed him to the parlour, where Emily lay on a sofa, a blanket over her knees. The girl's face was pale, her dark hair loose, but her eyes were alert, flickering with fear when she saw Miss Marple. "Emily, dear," Miss Marple said, sitting beside her, "you gave us a fright. Are you feeling better?" Her voice was soft like a grandmother's, but her eyes watched Emily's hands, which twisted the blanket's edge. Emily nodded, her voice small. "A little. I don't remember much. I was in the church looking for something. Then everything went dark." Her eyes darted to the vicar, who stood by the window, his back stiff. Miss Marple patted her hand. "Don't worry, dear, it'll come back. Did you see anyone? Or find anything odd?" She kept her tone light, but her mind was on the note. Crypt, truth. Had Emily been in the crypt? Emily hesitated, her lips trembling. I found some papers in the vestry, old ones about money. I was going to tell Uncle, but then—" She stopped, her eyes wide. The vicar turned, his face tight, but he said nothing. Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Rest now, dear, you're safe." She stood, her stick tapping, and thanked the vicar. As she left, she glanced back, seeing Reverend Clements whisper to Emily, his hand on her shoulder. Was he comforting her or warning her? She thought of Mrs. Bantry's gossip, trouble in London, money gone. Was the vicar hiding something? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, the hymnal open on her table. She studied the code, HV 312. Was it a Bible verse? A book, page, or something in the church? She needed help, and luckily Raymond West arrived that afternoon, his car rattling up the lane. He was a young writer, full of big ideas, but he loved his aunt's sharp mind, even if he teased her about her village mysteries. "Raymond, dear," Miss Marple said, pouring tea, "I need your clever brain. Look at this." She showed him the hymnal, pointing to the code. "It's from the church, and I think it's important." Raymond grinned, his eyes bright. "Aunt Jane, you're at it again. Let's see." He studied the scribble, his brow furrowed. HV could mean hymnal verse, or maybe a name, Henry Victor, and 3 to 12, a page or a date. He flipped through the hymnal, then stopped. Wait, hymn 312. It's Abide with Me. Could that be it? Miss Marple tilted her head. Perhaps, but the letters, HV, they don't fit a hymn. She thought of the church, its old records, its crypt. What if it's a record, like a ledger, hidden somewhere? She told Raymond about the chalice, Emily's attack, and the notes, keeping her voice low. His grin faded, replaced by a frown. Sounds serious, Aunt Jane. Maybe it's about the church fund. Ledgers have codes sometimes for accounts. Could be in the vestry, or that crypt you mentioned. He leaned back, sipping tea. Want me to poke around? Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. Not yet, dear, but you've given me an idea. I'll check the church tomorrow. For now, keep this quiet. She trusted Raymond, but St. Mary Mead was full of ears, and she didn't want the wrong person hearing. That evening, Miss Marple walked to the Blue Boar Inn, hoping to spot Mr. Lyle. She didn't see him, but Mrs. Price, serving at the bar, was eager to chat. He's out, Miss Marple, she said, wiping a glass. Left early, with that notebook of his. Says he's sketching the church, but I saw him by the crypt door again. Queer, isn't it?" Miss Marple nodded, her face sweet. "Very queer. Thank you, Mrs. Price." She left, her mind spinning. Mr. Lyle and the crypt, another thread to pull. She thought of Mr. Hargrove's secret meeting in the churchyard, his threat to Emily, and the vicar's past, that London trouble. The code, HV312, felt like the key. But to what? At home she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap, but she didn't knit. She stared at the hymnal, the code burning in her mind. She thought of Emily's papers in the vestry. Money, she'd said. Was it the missing church fund, or something older, tied to the vicar's past? She recalled a case in a nearby village where a coded note led to stolen jewels hidden in a church. Was this the same? She thought of Inspector Slack, who'd called that morning to say they'd found nothing in the churchyard. He thought the chalice was sold by a thief, but Miss Marple doubted it. The attack on Emily was too personal, the notes too pointed. Someone in St. Mary Mead was scared, hiding something big, money, a crime, maybe even a life. Miss Marple pictured the church, its dark crypt, its dusty records. The code might lead there, to a ledger or a letter. She'd ask the vicar for access, using the flower rota as an excuse. And she'd watch Mr. Hargrove, whose loud laugh didn't fool her. Mr. Lyle, too, with his sneaky ways. She'd invite him for tea soon, make him talk. She picked up her knitting, her fingers slow. The needles clicked, like a lock turning. The puzzle was taking shape, and Miss Marple was close to a piece that would fit. She thought of St. Mary Mead, so pretty and quiet, but full of shadows. People hid things, greed, fear, shame. She knew that better than anyone, from her years watching, listening, learning. Tomorrow she'd go to the church, check the vestry, maybe the crypt. She'd talk to Emily again, gently, to learn about those papers. And she'd keep an eye on Mr. Lyle and Mr. Hargrove, who both seemed too interested in the church's secrets. The truth was there, waiting, and Miss Marple was coming for it. She leaned back, her eyes half closed, her smile small. The village saw her as a sweet old lady, knitting by the fire. But she was more like a spider in a web, feeling every tremble. The scandal was growing, and someone was nervous. Miss Marple wasn't. She was ready. Chapter 5. The Stranger's Tale. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy cottage, the fire crackling softly as she arranged a tray of tea and scones. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 3 o'clock, and her guest, Mr. Lyle, was due any moment. She'd sent a note to the Blue Boar Inn that morning, inviting him for tea, her words polite but firm. Miss Marple knew how to make people talk, with a kind smile and a warm cuppa, and she meant to find out what this stranger was after in St. Mary Mead's church. Her mind buzzed with the puzzle, the stolen chalice, Emily's attack, the coded hymnal, and the notes hinting at a secret in the crypt. Mr. Lyle, with his sneaky ways, was a piece she needed to place. She smoothed her black dress, her hands steady, but her eyes were sharp, like a cat watching a mouse. Yesterday's clue, HV312, scratched in the hymnal, still nagged at her. Raymond thought it might point to a ledger, maybe hidden in the crypt. and Emily's words about papers in the vestry, tied to money, made Miss Marple wonder if the church's missing funds were just the start. She thought of Mr. Hargrove's threat to Emily, the vicar's worried face, and Mrs. Bantry's gossip about trouble in London. Mr. Lyle, always near the church, might know more than he let on. A knock at the door snapped her back. She opened it to find Mr. Lyle, slim and neat in his grey coat, his dark hair combed back, his eyes sharp but guarded. "Miss Marple, how kind," he said, his voice smooth like a salesman's. "I was surprised by your invitation." She smiled, her face soft. "Nonsense, Mr. Lyle. I like to meet new folks in the village. Come in, the kettle's hot." She led him to the parlour, where the tea-tray waited, the scones golden and warm. He sat, his hands resting on his knees, but Miss Marple noticed his fingers twitch just a little. Nervous, she thought, or hiding something. She poured tea, her movements slow, giving him time to relax. "So, Mr. Lyle," she said, passing him a cup, "Mrs. Price says you're writing a book about old churches. Our little church must seem dull compared to London's grand ones." Her tone was light, but her eyes watched his face. He sipped his tea, his smile tight. "Not at all. St. Mary Mead's church is charming, full of history. I'm studying its artefacts, like that silver chalice, before it was stolen, of course." His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked to hers, as if testing her. Miss Marple nodded, her face sweet. "Such a shame, that theft. And poor Emily, hurt so badly. You were at the fundraiser, weren't you? Did you notice anything odd?" She buttered a scone, her hands busy, but her mind was on his answer. Mr. Lyle hesitated, his cup pausing mid-air. "I saw nothing unusual, just villagers chatting. I heard about Emily, though. Terrible." He set his cup down, his fingers tapping. "The saucer." Miss Marple's lips pursed. He was dodging, she thought, like a boy caught with jam on his face. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "You seem fond of our church, Mr. Lyle. Mrs. Price saw you near the crypt door. Is that for your book?" Her question was soft but sharp, like a needle hidden in cotton. His eyes widened, just a flicker. Then he smiled. "You're observant, Miss Marple. Yes, I was curious. Old churches often have crypts with records, carvings, things a writer finds useful. I meant no harm." He leaned back, his voice smoother now, but Miss Marple didn't buy it. Curious was one thing, sneaking at night was another. She sipped her tea, her mind turning. "Records, you say? Like ledgers, perhaps? Our church has old ones, though I don't know where they're kept." She watched his face, seeing his jaw tighten just a bit. "Got you," she thought. He knew something about records, maybe the same. Papers Emily found. Mr. Lyle cleared his throat. "Ledgers can be dull, but sometimes they hide stories. I'm no accountant, though." He laughed, but it sounded forced like a creaky gate. Miss Marple smiled, letting the silence stretch. People talked to fill quiet, she knew, and Mr. Lyle was no exception. After a moment, he spoke, his voice lower. "Since you're so kind, Miss Marple, I'll be honest. I'm not just a writer. I'm a private investigator, hired by a family in London to find a missing heirloom. They think it's the chalice, stolen years ago and given to this church. I came to check, but now it's gone again." He spread his hands as if baring his soul, but his eyes stayed sharp. Miss Marple's heart skipped. An investigator! It fit his sneaky ways, but she didn't trust him yet. She thought of a detective she'd met once, full of charm but short on truth. How interesting, she said, her voice warm. And this heirloom, does it tie to anyone here? The vicar, perhaps, or Mr. Hargrove? Mr. Lyle shook his head too quickly. No, just the chalice itself. I've no names, just a job. Sipped his tea, his fingers steady now. But Miss Marple saw through him. He was hiding something, maybe a name, maybe more. She thought of the crypt, the code HV312, Emily's papers. Was he after the chalice, or something else? She changed, tack, her voice soft. You must know churches have secrets, Mr. Lyle. Our village is small, but folk talk. They say the church fund's short, and Emily found papers before she was hurt. Do you think it's all connected? Her eyes were kind, but they pinned him, like a butterfly in a case. He froze, his cup clinking against the saucer. I wouldn't know, Miss Marple. I'm just here for the chalice. He stood, his smile stiff. Thank you for the tea. I should go. He moved to the door, his steps quick, and Miss Marple let him go, her mind racing. He'd slipped just a little, and that was enough. She cleared the tea tray, her hands slow, but her thoughts flew. Mr. Lyle's story was half true, she was sure, an investigator maybe, but his interest in the crypt and his quick dodge about names told her he knew more. Was he after the chalice, or the papers Emily found? And why lie about the crypt? She thought of Mr. Hargrove's threat, the vicar's, past, the coded hymnal. The puzzle was growing, and Mr. Lyle was a piece, but not the centre. She sat by the fire, pulling out the hymnal with its code, HV312. She traced the letters, her mind on Raymond's idea. A ledger, maybe in the crypt. Mr. Lyle's talk of records fit too well. She needed to see the crypt, but she'd need the vicar's permission. Tomorrow, she'd ask, using the flower rota as a reason. She'd also talk to Emily again, if the girl was stronger, and keep an eye on Mr. Hargrove, whose secret meeting in the churchyard still bothered her. The phone rang, startling her. It was Mrs. Bantry, her voice loud. Jane, you'll never believe it. Emily's awake, and she's talking, but she's scared. Says she saw someone in the church before she was hit. A man, she thinks. But it was dark. And Inspector Slacks, poking around, asking about Mr. Hargrove's accounts. What's going on? Miss Marple's lips pursed. I don't know yet, Dolly, but I'm finding out. Tell me if you hear more. She hung up, her mind spinning. Emily saw a man. Mr. Lyle? Mr. Hargrove? Or someone new? And Slack's questions about Hargrove's accounts pointed to the missing money. She thought of the vicar's London trouble, a missing parishioner, money gone. Was it all tied to the crypt? She walked to the church that evening, her stick tapping, the air cold and sharp. The church was locked, but she stood in the churchyard, staring at the crypt door. A low stone arch, half hidden by ivy. She thought of Mr. Lyle, seen there at night, and Emily's note, crypt truth. Something was down there, she was sure. A ledger or a letter, maybe the key to the scandal. Back home, she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. But she didn't knit. She stared at the hymnal, the code burning in her mind. She thought of Mr. Lyle's half-truths, Emily's fear, Mr. Hargrove's red face, the vicar's silence. The church was the heart of it, its old stones hiding a secret someone would hurt to keep. She recalled a case years ago where a stolen relic led to a hidden will in a church. Was this the same? Miss Marple pictured St. Mary Mead, so quiet and pretty, but full of shadows. She knew people, how they lied, how they scared, how they broke. She'd seen it in her neighbours, her friends, even herself, long ago. But she also knew how to find truth, with a soft word, a quick eye, a bit of waiting. Tomorrow she'd see the crypt, talk to Emily, watch Mr. Hargrove. She'd ask Raymond to check Mr. Lyle's story, maybe write to his London friends. The puzzle was close to cracking, and Miss Marple felt it like a knot ready to untie. She picked up her knitting, her fingers slow. The needles clicked like a door creaking open. The scandal was waiting, and Miss Marple was almost there. Chapter 6. The Crypt's Secret Miss. Jane Marple stood at her cottage window, the morning mist curling over St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes. Her tea was cold, forgotten in her hand, as her mind spun through the church mystery. The stolen chalice, Emily's attack, the coded hymnal, Mr. Lyle's half-truths, and the notes hinting at a secret in the crypt. It was a puzzle with too many pieces, but Miss Marple felt close to fitting them together. Today she'd see the church crypt, where Emily's note and Mr. Lyle's sneaky visits pointed. She'd ask Reverend Clements for access, using the flower rota as an excuse, and bring Inspector Slack along to keep things official. Her sharp eyes gleamed like a needle ready to thread. She dressed in her black coat and hat, grabbed her stick, and walked to the vicarage. The air was damp, smelling of moss and earth, the church tower looming through the fog. Reverend Clements opened the door, his face paler than yesterday, his eyes red as if he hadn't slept. "Miss Marple, good morning," he said, his voice thin. "Is something wrong?" She smiled, her face soft. "Not at all, Reverend. I'm checking the flower rota, but I wondered about the crypt. We might store old vases there, and I'd like to look. Could you open it?" Her tone was light, but her eyes watched his hands, which shook as he fumbled with his keys. "The crypt," he said, his voice high. "It's dusty, hardly used, but if you insist, I'll come along." He hesitated, then nodded, as if convincing himself. Miss Marple noted his fear, her mind flicking to Mrs. Bantry's gossip. Trouble in London, money gone. Was the vicar hiding something down there? She called Inspector Slack from the vicarage phone, her voice calm. "Inspector, I'm at the church with Reverend Clements. We're checking the crypt for flower supplies. You might want to join us." Slack grumbled, but agreed, his boots soon echoing on the churchyard path. He was a brusque man, with a red face and a quick temper, but Miss Marple knew he'd be thorough, even if he scoffed at her meddling. The three entered the church, the air cool and heavy, smelling of wax and stone. Reverend Clements led them to the crypt door, a low arch by the chancel, its iron lock rusty. He fumbled with the key, his hands shaking, and Miss Marple's lips pursed. Fear, she thought, or guilt. The door creaked open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. Slack lit a torch, its beam cutting through the gloom. "Careful, Miss Marple," Slack said, his voice gruff. "Old steps like these are tricky." She nodded, her stick tapping as she followed. her heart steady despite the chill. The crypt was damp, its walls lined with stone tombs, their carvings worn. Dust tickled her nose, and cobwebs brushed her hat. She thought of Emily's note, crypt, truth, and the hymnal code HV 312. Was this where the secret hid? Slack swept the torch around, his boots loud. "Nothing here but old bones," he muttered. But Miss Marple's eyes were sharp, scanning the shadows. She noticed a loose stone in the wall, near a tomb marked H. Vinton, 1812. Her breath caught. HV, like the code. She pointed, her voice soft. "Inspector, look there. That stone's not flush." Slack frowned but knelt, his fingers prying at the stone. It shifted, revealing a small hollow. Inside was a dusty ledger, its leather cover cracked. Reverend Clements gasped, his face white. "What's that?" he stammered. But Miss Marple saw his eyes. Fear, not surprise. He knew, she thought, or suspected. Slack opened the ledger, its pages yellowed. "Looks like accounts," he said, squinting. "Names, dates, payments, but no church fund. Odd sums to someone called J. Black. Who's that?" He turned to the vicar, his voice hard. Reverend Clements shook his head, his hands twisting. "I don't know. I've never seen it." Miss Marple's mind raced. Illicit payments, she thought. Maybe blackmail. She recalled a case in St. Mary, Mead, where a hidden ledger showed bribes to keep a scandal quiet. Was this the same? She thought of Mr. Hargrove's threat to Emily, Mr. Lyle's talk of records, the vicar's London past. The ledger was the key, but to what? Money? A crime? Or something darker? They climbed back to the church, the ledger in Slack's hands. Reverend Clements looked ill, his steps slow. Miss Marple patted his arm, her voice kind. "Don't worry, Reverend. The truth will help, not hurt." But her mind was on his fear, his silence. Was he protecting someone, or himself? Outside the fog was lifting, the churchyard grey and wet. Slack tucked the ledger under his coat. "I'll take this to the station, Miss Marple. Might be tied to the theft or that attack. You stay out of trouble here." He marched off, his torch bobbing. Miss Marple smiled, her face sweet, but trouble was exactly where she was headed. She returned to the vicarage to check on Emily, her stick tapping. Mrs. Bantry was there, her face grim. "Jane, it's awful. Emily's been attacked again, in her room. Dr. Haydock's with her now." Miss Marple's heart sank, her hand tightening on her stick. She hurried inside, finding Emily on the sofa, a fresh bruise on her cheek, her eyes wide with fear. Dr. Haydock was packing his bag, his face stern. "She's lucky," he said. "Just a scare, no real harm. Says someone grabbed her in the dark, warned her to keep quiet." She didn't see who. Emily nodded, her voice small. "I was asleep then. Hands on me. I screamed and they ran." She clutched a blanket, her hands shaking. Miss Marple sat beside her, her voice soft. "You're safe now, dear. Did you hear a voice? Anything familiar?" Emily shook her head, tears falling. "It was low, rough. A man, I think." Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind spinning. "Another attack? So soon?" Someone was desperate, scared of what Emily knew. Those papers, maybe, or the ledger. She thought of Mr. Hargrove, his red face, his threat in the vestry. Mr. Lyle, sneaky and sharp, sniffing around the crypt. Or the vicar, pale and silent with his London secrets. The ledger's payments to J. Black nagged at her. Was it blackmail, tied to the vicar's past, or Mr. Hargrove's missing funds? She recalled Emily's words. Papers about money. Were they the same ledger or something else? Mrs. Bantry pulled Miss Marple aside, her voice low. "Jane, what's happening? First the chalice, now Emily again. And Slack's asking about Hargrove's car. Says it's too fancy for his pay. Is he stealing?" Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Perhaps, Dolly, but it's bigger than that. Keep an ear out, will you?" Mrs. Bantry agreed, her eyes wide. Miss Marple walked home, the fog gone but the air cold. She thought of the crypt, dark and dusty, hiding that ledger. HV 312. The code fit the tomb. But what was J. Black? She pictured the church, its quiet pews, its shadows. The scandal was growing, tied to money, fear, maybe an old sin. She recalled a London case where a vicar paid to hide an affair. His life ruined when the truth came out. Was Reverend Clements the same? At her cottage she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap, but she didn't knit. She stared at the hymnal, its code solved, but the ledger raised new questions. She thought of Emily, scared and hurt, Mr. Lyle's investigator story, Mr. Hargrove's secret meeting, the vicar's shaking hands. The church was the heart of it, its crypt a lock she'd started to open. She pictured St. Mary Mead, so pretty and quiet, but full of secrets. She knew people, how they lied, how they hurt, how they hid. She'd seen it in her neighbours, her friends, even herself, long ago. But she also knew how to find truth, with a kind word, a sharp eye, a bit of patience. Tomorrow she'd talk to Raymond about the ledger. Maybe check Mr. Lyle's story through his London contacts. She'd watch Mr. Hargrove, whose fancy car and loud laugh didn't fool her. And the vicar, she'd ask about J. Black, gently, over tea. Emily's second attack meant time was short. Someone was scared, and scared people made mistakes. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her fingers slow. The needles clicked like a key turning. The puzzle was close to breaking, and she felt it like a storm ready to burst. The scandal was there, in the church's shadows, and Miss Marple was coming for it. Chapter 7. The Web of Motives. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, the morning light soft through her lace curtains. Her tea steamed, but her mind was on the church mystery, sharp as a needle. The stolen chalice, Emily's attacks, the coded hymnal, the ledger of secret payments to J. Black, and Mr. Lyle's sneaky investigator story spun in her head like threads waiting to be tied. Yesterday's crypt discovery had cracked the puzzle open, but the pieces weren't all in place. She thought of Mr. Hargrove's red face, Reverend Clemence's fear, and Emily's trembling voice. Today, she'd pull them together, like knitting a scarf, to see who flinched. She'd invited them to the vicarage for tea, a cosy trap to loosen tongues. She dressed in her neat black coat and hat, her stick tapping as she walked to the vicarage. The air was cool, smelling of damp leaves and wood smoke, the church tower grey against the sky. St. Mary Mead looked calm, but Miss Marple knew secrets hid in its quiet corners, like dust in a pew. She thought of the ledger, its odd payments hinting at blackmail, and Emily's papers about money. Was it the church fund, or something older, tied to the vicar's London past. Reverend Clements greeted her at the vicarage, his face pale, his hands fidgeting with his collar. "Miss Marple, welcome," he said, his voice thin. "Emily's feeling better, and Mr. Hargrove and Mr. Lyle are coming. I hope this tea is pleasant." His eyes darted away, and Miss Marple's lips pursed. He was scared, she thought, of more than a stolen chalice. The parlour was warm, with a fire crackling and a table set with cups and cakes. Emily sat on the sofa, her face still pale, a bandage on her cheek from the second attack. She managed a small smile, but her hands twisted her skirt. Mr. Hargrove arrived next, his loud laugh filling the room, his red face shiny. "Miss Marple, always a pleasure," he boomed, but his eyes were wary, like a dog guarding a bone. Mr. Lyle slipped in last, slim and quiet, his grey coat neat, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Miss Marple nodded to each, her face sweet, but her mind was a net, ready to catch lies. She poured tea, her hands slow, letting the silence settle. People talked when it got quiet, she knew. "Such a shame about the church," she said, her voice soft. "First the chalice, then poor Emily hurt, twice, and that missing money. It's enough to upset anyone." She sipped her tea, watching their faces. Emily flinched, her cup clinking. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "I just found those papers in the vestry, about money going somewhere it shouldn't." Her eyes flicked to Mr. Hargrove, who coughed, his face redder. "Nonsense, girl!" Hargrove snapped, his voice loud. "You're imagining things. The church fund's fine, just a mix-up." He laughed, but it sounded forced, like a cracked bell. Miss Marple noted his hands, gripping his cup too tight. Guilty, she thought, or scared. Reverend Clements cleared, his throat, his voice shaky. "Let's not jump to conclusions. The church has challenges, but we'll sort it out." His eyes met Miss Marple's pleading, and she thought of Mrs. Bantry's gossip. A London scandal, a missing parishioner, money gone. Was he hiding the same kind of trouble? Mr. Lyle sipped his tea, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. "Small villages always have stories," he said, his voice smooth. "I'm just here for the chalice, as I told Miss Marple. Old heirlooms can stir up fuss." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Miss Marple tilted her head. He was too smooth, like a salesman hiding a bad deal. She set her cup down, her voice gentle. "Mr. Lyle, you mentioned records in the crypt. And Emily, you found papers. I wonder if they're tied to that ledger Inspector Slack found, with payments, to someone called J. Black. Does that name mean anything?" Her question hung in the air, soft but heavy, like a stone in a pond. The room went still. Emily's eyes widened, her hands trembling. Mr. Hargrove's face turned purple, his laugh gone. "Ledger? What nonsense!" he blustered, but his voice shook. Reverend Clements stared at his hands, his face white. Mr. Lyle's fingers paused on his cup, just a moment, but Miss Marple saw it. "Got you," she thought. Reverend Clements spoke, his voice low. I don't know any J. Black, but years ago in London there was trouble. A parishioner, a woman, left suddenly, and money was missing. I didn't take it, but I covered it up to protect the church. I thought it was over." His voice broke, and Emily touched his arm, her eyes soft. Miss Marple nodded, her face kind. People make mistakes, Reverend, but secrets come out like weeds in a garden. She turned to Mr. Hargrove, her eyes sharp. And you, Mr. Hargrove, you handle the church fund. Those papers Emily found, did they show money going to J. Black? Her voice was soft, but it cut like a knife. Hargrove stood, his chair scraping. This is ridiculous. You're accusing me, an old spinster with too much time. Emily's confused, and that ledger's nothing. He pointed at Emily, his finger shaking. She's the one poking around, causing trouble. Emily gasped, tears falling. I only wanted to help Uncle. The papers showed money leaving the fund to a bank in London. I didn't steal anything. Her voice was small, but firm, and Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind racing. London again, she thought. The vicar's past, the ledger, the money. It was all tied. Mr. Lyle stood, his voice calm. I think we're all tired. I'll leave you to sort this out. He moved to the door, but Miss Marple's voice stopped him, sweet but firm. Mr. Lyle, you're so interested in the crypt. Did you know about the ledger? Or was it the chalice you wanted for your client? Her eyes pinned him, and he froze, his smile gone. I told you, I'm just an investigator, he said, but his voice was tight. He left quickly, his steps sharp on the gravel path. Miss Marple watched him go, her mind spinning. He was part of it, she was sure, but how? The chalice, the ledger, or something else? The tea ended, Mr. Hargrove storming out, Reverend Clement silent, Emily shaking. Miss Marple stayed, helping clear the cups, her eyes on the vicar. Reverend, she said softly, if you know more, tell Inspector Slack. It'll help Emily. He nodded, his face grey, but said nothing. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting untouched. The ledger's payments, Emily's papers, the vicar's London story. It was coming together. She thought of a scandal years ago in a nearby village where a churchwarden paid to hide an affair. His daughter sent away. Was J. Black a child from that London trouble, now grown and demanding money? Or was Mr. Hargrove stealing, using the name to cover it? She thought of Emily, attacked twice, scared but brave. The girl knew something, maybe from those papers. And Mr. Lyle, with his investigator tale, was he after the chalice or the truth behind J. Black? Mr. Hargrove's anger, his fancy car, pointed to guilt. But the vicar's silence worried her too. She recalled the hymnal code, HV 312, leading to the crypt's ledger. The crypt held more, she felt, but she needed proof. She pictured the church, its dark corners, its dusty crypt. The scandal was old, she thought, tied to love and money, like so many secrets. She knew people, how they hid shame, how they broke. She'd seen it in St. Mary Mead, in her neighbours, even herself, long ago. But she also knew how to find truth, with a kind word, a sharp glance, a bit of waiting. Tomorrow she'd talk to Raymond about J. Black, maybe check London records. She'd watch Mr. Hargrove, whose bluster hid fear, and Mr. Lyle, whose smooth words hid lies. Emily needed protecting, and the vicar needed pushing. The puzzle was close to done, and Miss Marple felt it, like a knot ready to untie. She picked up her knitting, her fingers slow. The needles clicked like a clock ticking down. The scandal was in the church's shadows, and Miss Marple was almost there, her net tightening around the truth. Chapter 8. The trap in the church. Miss Jane Marple woke early, her cottage quiet except for the soft tick of the mantel clock. The morning light was grey, promising rain, but her mind was bright, piecing together the church mystery like a quilt. The stolen chalice, Emily's attacks, the coded hymnal, the ledger of payments to J. Black, and yesterday's tense tea at the vicarage had brought her close to the truth. Mr. Hargrove's bluster, Mr. Lyle's slippery story. Reverend Clement's guilty silence and Emily's frightened eyes pointed to a scandal. Money stolen, an old affair hidden, maybe a child seeking revenge. Today, Miss Marple would set a trap to catch the culprit, using the church itself as her net. She sipped her tea, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. The ledger from the crypt, with its secret payments, hinted at blackmail, tied to the vicar's, London past, or Mr. Hargrove's missing church funds. Emily's papers, showing money sent to a London bank, matched the ledger's trail. And Mr. Lyle, the investigator, was too interested in the crypt and chalice. Miss Marple thought of the hymnal code HV312, which led to the ledger. Was the chalice another clue, or just a prize? She'd find out tonight. At a special church service, the vicar had planned to pray for Emily's recovery. She dressed in her black coat and hat, grabbed her stick, and walked to Mrs. Bantry's house to share her plan. The air was damp, smelling of wet grass and earth, the church tower dim in the mist. Mrs. Bantry welcomed her with a pot of tea, her face eager. "Jane, you look like a cat with a mouse. What's brewing?" "Everyone's talking about Emily's second attack and that ledger Slack found." Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "Dolly, I need your help. Tonight's service at the church. I want a rumour spread. Say the chalice has been found and will be returned during the service. Don't say how. Just let it slip." Her eyes twinkled, and Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands, loving a scheme. "Brilliant, Jane. I'll tell Mrs. Price. She'll have it all over St. Mary Mead by noon." "But why? Are you fishing for the thief?" Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her eyes wide. Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Something like that. The chalice is gone, but someone wants it badly. Maybe Mr. Lyle, or Mr. Hargrove. This will stir them up." She thought of Mr. Lyle's story, an investigator hunting an heirloom, and his sneaky visits to the crypt. Was he the thief, or after the ledger's secret? And Mr. Hargrove, with his fancy car and loud denials, was hiding something too. Bantry agreed, and Miss Marple left, her stick tapping as she headed to the vicarage to see Emily. The girl was stronger today, sitting in the parlour, her bruise fading but her eyes still scared. Reverend Clements hovered nearby, his face grey, his hands twisting. "Miss Marple, thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "Emily's better, but worried." Miss Marple sat beside Emily, her voice gentle. "Dear, you're brave. To keep going. Those papers you found, did they mention J. Black?" She watched Emily's face, seeing her flinch, her hands clutching her skirt. Emily nodded, her voice small. "Yes, a name in the papers with bank details. I thought it was a mistake, but then I was attacked. I think someone knew I saw them." Her eyes flicked to the vicar, who looked away, his face tight. Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind spinning. The ledger, the papers, J. Black. It was all one thread, leading to a secret someone would hurt to hide. She turned to Reverend Clements, her voice kind but firm. "Reverend, you spoke of a London scandal. A woman, money gone. Was there a child? Someone who might be J. Black?" Her question was soft, but it hit like a stone, and the vicar's face crumpled. "I don't know," he whispered. "There were rumours, but I never asked. I paid to keep it quiet, sent money to a bank thinking it was done. I was wrong." His voice broke, and Emily took his hand, her eyes soft. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Blackmail, she thought, an old sin paid for years later. Was J. Black that child, now grown? She left the vicarage, her mind buzzing. The church service was her chance to flush out the culprit. She met Inspector Slack at the church, her voice calm as she shared her plan. "Inspector, spread word the chalice is back. Watch the service tonight, especially Mr. Lyle and Mr. Hargrove. Someone will move, I'm sure." Slack frowned, his red face sceptical, but he nodded, muttering about old ladies and traps. The evening came, the church glowing with candlelight, the pews full. The rumour had spread thanks to Mrs. Bantry, and whispers filled the air. Chalice, found, miracle, who did it? Reverend Clements led the service, his voice shaky, praying for Emily and the church. Miss Marple sat near the back, her prayer book open, but her eyes darted from face to face. Mr. Hargrove was in the front, his red face stiff, his hands fidgeting. Mr. Lyle stood by the side, slim and quiet, his sharp eyes on the altar, where a cloth covered something, Slack's idea, to look like the chalice. The hymns rose, and Miss Marple watched. Halfway through, Mr. Lyle moved, slipping toward the chancel, his steps soft. Her heart skipped. "Got you," she thought. She nodded to Slack, who was near the vestry, his eyes narrow. Lyle reached the altar, his hand lifting the cloth, but Slack stepped out, his voice sharp. "Not so fast, Mr. Lyle, looking for something." The congregation gasped, heads turning. Lyle froze, his face pale, his hand dropping. I thought it was the chalice," he stammered. "I'm working for a client, I told you." Slack grabbed his arm, pulling him to the vestry, and Miss Marple followed, her stick tapping, her mind racing. In the vestry, Lyle slumped in, a chair, his smooth mask gone. "All right," he said, his voice low. "I'm not just an investigator. My mother was the woman in London, the one Clements paid to leave. She had me, but never told who my father was. She said the chalice was proof, a gift from him hidden in the church. I came to find it, to know the truth." His eyes were hard, but hurt, and Miss Marple felt a pang. A child seeking roots, she thought, like so many. Slack frowned, his notebook out. "So you stole the chalice, attacked the girl." Lyle shook his head, his voice fierce. "No, I never touched Emily. I only looked in the crypt, the vestry. The chalice was already gone when I got here." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes sharp. His story fit the ledger, the payments to J. Black. Maybe his mother's alias, but the attacks on Emily, that was someone else. She spoke, her voice soft. "Mr. Lyle, did you find the ledger in the crypt? or Emily's papers? Lyle shook his head, his face tight. No, just old records. I thought the chalice was enough. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning. He was part of the puzzle, but not the whole. The attacks, the money, pointed elsewhere. Mr. Hargrove, maybe, or even the vicar. The service ended, the congregation buzzing as Slack took Lyle to the station for questions. Miss Marple walked home, the rain starting, her coat damp but her mind clear. Lyle's story explained the chalice, the crypt, but Emily's attacks and the ledger's payments were still loose threads. She thought of Mr. Hargrove, silent tonight, his red face stiff, his fancy car, his threats to Emily, the missing funds. He was hiding something big. She pictured the church, its candlelit pews, its dark crypt. The scandal was old, tied to love, money, a child's pain. She knew people, how they hid shame, how they hurt. She'd seen it in St. Mary Mead, in her neighbours, even herself long ago, but she also knew how to find truth, with a kind word, a sharp eye, a bit of cunning. Tomorrow she'd talk to Raymond about Lyle's story, check London records for J. Black. She'd push Mr. Hargrove, maybe visit his office, and talk to the vicar about those payments. Emily's safety was urgent, with 2 attacks and a desperate culprit still free. The puzzle was almost done, and Miss Marple felt it like a lock ready to spring. She sat by her fire, her knitting in her lap, but she didn't knit. The needles lay still, the hymnal code solved, the ledger found, but the truth was close. She pictured St. Mary Mead, quiet and pretty, its secrets deep. The scandal was in the church's shadows, and Miss Marple was nearly there, her trap sprung, her net tightening. Chapter 9. The Final Revelation. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, the fire casting warm shadows on the walls. It was late morning, and the rain pattered softly outside, but her mind was clear, piecing together the church mystery like the final stitches in a quilt. The stolen chalice, Emily's attacks, the coded hymnal, the ledger of payments to J. Black, Mr. Lyle's confession as the hidden child, and Mr. Hargrove's guilty bluster. It all pointed to a scandal of greed and secrets. Last night's trap at the church had caught Mr. Lyle, but Miss Marple knew he wasn't the whole story. Today she'd gather everyone at the vicarage to unravel the truth, her net ready to close. She sipped her tea, her hands steady, her eyes sharp, the ledger from the crypt, with its payments to J. Black, tied to the vicar's London past. An affair, a child, money paid to keep it quiet. Mr. Lyle, that child, wanted the chalice as proof of his roots, but he swore he didn't attack Emily. Miss Marple believed him, his hurt too real. The attacks, the missing church funds, Emily's papers, and Mr. Hargrove's red-faced denials pointed to a different culprit. She thought of the hymnal code, HV 312, leading to the ledger, and Emily's note, crypt truth. The chalice was a distraction, she was sure, hiding a bigger crime. She dressed in her black coat and hat, grabbed her stick, and walked to the vicarage through the drizzle. The air smelled of wet earth and leaves, the church tower dim in the mist. St. Mary Mead was quiet, but its secrets were loud in Miss Marple's mind. She'd asked Inspector Slack to bring Mr. Hargrove, Mr. Lyle and Emily to the vicarage, with Reverend Clements hosting. Mrs. Bantry would be there too, her gossip a spark to light the truth. The vicarage parlour was warm, the fire crackling, but the air was heavy, like before a storm. Reverend Clement stood by the window, his face grey, his hands twisting. Emily sat on the sofa, her bruise fading but her eyes scared. Mr. Hargrove slumped in a chair, his red face sweaty, his loud laugh gone. Mr. Lyle sat stiffly, his grey coat neat, his sharp eyes wary. Inspector Slack stood by the door, his notebook ready, his red face grim. Mrs. Bantry perched on a chair, her eyes wide, eager for the show. Miss Marple poured tea, her movements slow, letting the silence stretch. People squirmed when it was quiet, she knew, and she wanted them nervous. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice soft like a grandmother's. This church trouble, the chalice, Emily's attacks, the missing money, has upset our village. I think it's time we cleared it up. Her eyes moved from face to face, sharp as needles. Mr. Hargrove coughed, his voice loud. "This is nonsense, Miss Marple. You're stirring trouble, an old lady with too many ideas." But his hands shook, and his eyes darted to the door. Miss Marple smiled, her face sweet. Guilty, she thought. She turned to Mr. Lyle, her voice gentle. "Mr. Lyle, you told us you're the child of a woman from Reverend Clemence's London days, hunting the chalice as proof of your father. You looked in the crypt, but you didn't attack Emily, did you?" Her question was soft, but it pinned him. Lyle nodded, his voice low. "I swear I didn't touch her. I just wanted the chalice. I found nothing but old records." His eyes were honest, and Miss Marple believed him, her mind ticking. He was a side piece, not the centre. She looked at Reverend Clements, her voice kind. "Reverend, you paid money in London to hide an affair, sent to a woman, Mr. Lyle's mother, under the name J. Black. You thought it was over, but it followed you here, didn't it?" The vicar's face crumpled, his hands covering his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I was young, foolish. I paid to keep her quiet, for the church's sake. I didn't know about a child until now." Emily took his hand, her eyes soft, and Miss Marple felt a pang. A good man, broken by an old mistake. She turned to Mr. Hargrove, her voice firm. "Mr. Hargrove, you handle the church fund." Emily found papers showing money going to a London bank, like the ledger's payments to J. Black. "But they weren't the vicar's, were they? You took the money to pay debts, your fancy car, your big house. When Emily found out, you scared her, attacked her to keep her quiet." Her words were soft, but they hit like stones. Hargrove stood, his face purple, his voice a roar. "Lies! You've got no proof, you meddling spinster!" But his hands shook, and his eyes were wild. Emily gasped, tears falling, and Slack stepped closer, his hand on his notebook. Miss Marple held up the scrap of paper from Sunday, her voice calm. "This note, found in your pew, Mr. Hargrove, must stop church, secret. It's your writing, isn't it?" And Emily's note, crypt truth, came after she found your papers. "You stole the chalice to distract us, to make it look like a thief from outside. But you attacked Emily twice, because she knew." Her eyes pinned him, and he sank back, his face grey. Slack moved, his voice sharp. "That's enough, Hargrove. We've checked your accounts, money's gone, wired to London, and your car's on loan. You're coming with me." He grabbed Hargrove's arm, and the man didn't fight, his shoulders sagging. The room was silent, except for Emily's soft sobs and the fire's crackle. Miss Marple spoke, her voice gentle. The chalice was a trick to hide the real crime, stealing from the church fund. Mr. Hargrove used J. Black to make it look like the vicar's old payments, but it was his own theft to cover debts. He attacked Emily when she found the papers, and again when she wouldn't stay quiet. She looked at Emily, her eyes kind. "You were brave, dear, to keep looking for the truth." Reverend Clements spoke, his voice broken. "I should have told the truth years ago. My silence let this happen. I'm sorry, Emily, Mr. Lyle." Lyle nodded, his face hard but softer now, as if a weight was gone. Emily hugged her uncle, tears falling, and Miss Marple smiled, her heart warm. The truth hurt, but it healed too. Slack took Hargrove away, the ledger and papers as proof. Miss Marple stayed, helping clear the tea, her mind settling. The chalice was still missing, likely sold by Hargrove, but Slack would search his house. The scandal was out. Greed, fear, and old love, and St. Mary Mead would talk for weeks, but it was done. She walked home, the rain stopped, the air fresh. The church tower stood tall, its secrets spilled. She thought of Mr. Lyle, finding his truth and Emily safe at last. The vicar would heal with time, and the church would go on, its stones quiet again. She recalled a case years ago where a thief hid behind a holy mask, caught by a small clue. People were the same, she thought, greedy or scared, but truth always came out. At her cottage she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. She picked up her needles, her fingers moving smoothly. The puzzle was done, the threads tied. She pictured St. Mary Mead, pretty and quiet, its shadows lighter now. She knew people, how they lied, how they hurt, how they hoped. She'd seen it in her neighbours, her friends, even herself, long ago. The needles clicked like a door closing. The scandal was over, and Miss Marple was content, her sharp mind resting, ready for the next puzzle in her quiet village. Chapter 10. Peace Restored. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, the afternoon sun spilling through her lace curtains, warming the cosy parlour. A fire crackled softly, and her knitting lay in her lap, the needles still for once. The church mystery was solved, its secrets laid bare like a finished quilt. Mr. Hargrove's arrest for stealing the church fund and attacking Emily, Mr. Lyle's truth as the hidden child, and Reverend Clements's old London scandal had shaken St. Mary Mead, but the village was settling now, like dust after a storm. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her sharp eyes soft, her mind turning over the past week's puzzle, content with its tidy end. The morning had been busy. Inspector Slack had called, his gruff voice almost kind, to say they'd found the silver chalice, hidden in Mr. Hargrove's shed, wrapped in old sacks. He'd sold some church funds to a London bank, using the fake name J. Black to hide his theft, but hadn't sold the chalice yet, hoping to pin the crime on a stranger. Slack recovered most of the money, and the village had rallied, donating to restore the church fund. Miss Marple smiled, her heart warm. St. Mary Mead was small, but its people were good, quick to mend what was broken. She thought of yesterday's gathering at the vicarage, where she'd laid out the truth. Mr. Hargrove's red-faced denials, his attacks on Emily to silence her, the chalice stolen to distract from his embezzlement. It all fit, like the last piece in her puzzle. The hymnal code, HV312, had led to the crypt's ledger, showing his theft masked as the vicar's old payments. Mr. Lyle's hunt for the chalice, tied to his mother's affair, and Reverend Clemence's guilty silence had muddied the trail, but Miss Marple's sharp eyes had seen through it as always. She set her cup down, her hands folding neatly. The village was buzzing, Mrs. Bantry had said over the phone, thrilled to share the news. "Jane, you're a marvel," she'd crowed. "Hargrove locked up, the chalice back, and Emily safe. How do you do it?" Miss Marple had chuckled, her voice soft. "Just watching, Dolly, and listening. People tell you everything if you let them." She hadn't mentioned her knitting, or how its steady clicks helped her think, like a clock counting clues. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was Emily, her face brighter now, her dark hair tied back, a shy smile on her lips. "Miss Marple, I wanted to thank you," she said, stepping inside, a basket of scones in her hands. "You saved me and Uncle. I was so scared, but you made it right." Miss Marple patted the sofa, her face kind. "Sit, dear. No need for thanks. You were brave finding those papers. Tell me, how's your uncle?" She poured tea, her eyes watching Emily's hands, steady now, no longer twisting in fear. Emily sighed, her voice soft. "He's better. He told the village about London, the money he paid to hide that woman's leaving. People understand mostly. He's staying on as vicar, and I'll help him. Mr. Lyle's gone, but he wrote Uncle a letter saying he forgives him." Her eyes shone, and Miss Marple nodded, her heart warm. Forgiveness was hard, but it mended things, like darning a torn sock. They chatted, Emily's voice lighter, her fear gone. She spoke of the church, its flowers blooming again, the fund growing with donations. "We're having a service tomorrow," she said, "to bless the chalice's return. Will you come?" Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Of course, dear. I wouldn't miss it." Emily left, her steps quick, and Miss Marple sat back, her mind drifting. She thought of Mr. Lyle, his sharp eyes softened by truth, leaving St. Mary Mead with his mother's story, but no chalice. He wasn't guilty, just lost, like a boy she'd known years ago, searching for a father's name. And Reverend Clemence, his grey face lighter now, his sin confessed. The village would gossip, but they'd forgive, as villages did, their hearts bigger than their tongues. She thought of Mr. Hargrove, locked away, his loud laugh silenced. His greed had hurt Emily, scared the church, but his fancy car and big house were gone now, his debts exposed. Miss Marple shook her head, her lips pursed. Greed was a trap, she knew, like a mouse chasing cheese. She recalled a shopkeeper in St. Mary Mead, long ago, who'd stolen from his till, caught by a child's sharp eyes. People didn't change, she thought, only their tricks. The church was quiet again, its stones holding no more secrets. The chalice gleamed on the altar, the crypt locked, the ledger safe with slack. Miss Marple pictured the service tomorrow. The pews full, the hymns rising. St. Mary Mead would heal, its faith strong, its community tight. She felt a glow, like the sun on her face knowing she'd helped, her quiet way better than any shout. Mrs. Bantry arrived later, her face rosy, her voice loud. "Jane, you must tell me everything," she said, flopping into a chair. "How did you know it was Hargrove? And that chalice trick, pure genius." She helped herself to a scone, crumbs falling, her eyes wide. Miss Marple smiled, pouring tea. "It was simple, Dolly. Hargrove was too loud, too scared. His note, his threats to Emily, his fancy car, it didn't add up. The chalice was a ruse to hide his theft. I just watched and listened." She sipped her tea, her voice soft, but her mind flicked to the clues, the hymnal code, Emily's note, the ledger's J black. Each had whispered truth, and she'd heard. Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her voice low. "And Lyle? That poor boy chasing a ghost. Do you think he'll come back?" Miss Marple shook her head, her eyes soft. "No, he's found what he needed. Truth, not trouble. He'll move on, like most do." She thought of the vicar's payments, the affair's shadow, and felt a pang. Love broke hearts, but truth mended them in time. They talked as the sun sank, the fire glowing, the rain a soft patter. Mrs. Bantry shared village news, Mrs. Price's new hat, the baker's son engaged, the church roof fund growing. Miss Marple listened, her face calm, but her mind was on human nature. People lied, hurt, hoped, just as they always had. She'd seen it in St. Mary Mead, in her neighbours, her friends, even herself long ago. But she'd also seen kindness, like Emily's scones, the village's donations, the vicar's honest tears. Mrs. Bantry left, her voice echoing down the lane, and Miss Marple sat alone, her knitting in her lap. She picked up her needles, her fingers moving smoothly, the wool soft and warm. The needles clicked, like a clock winding down, the puzzle done. She pictured the church, its stained glass windows bright, its pews full tomorrow. The chalice would shine, the village would sing, and St. Mary Mead would be itself again, quiet and good. She thought of the mystery, its twists and turns like a path through a garden. The chalice, the attacks, the ledger, the code, each had led her to truth, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She smiled, her heart light. The village saw her as a sweet old lady knitting by the fire. But she was more, like a spider in a web, feeling every tremble. She'd caught the scandal, tied its threads, and set her village free. Miss Marple leaned back, her eyes half closed, her knitting slow. The fire crackled, the rain fell, and her cottage was cosy, its walls holding years of puzzles solved. St. Mary Mead was safe, its secrets out, its heart beating strong. She knew another mystery would come, as they always did, but for now she was content, her mind resting, her needles dancing. The clock ticked, the fire glowed, and Miss Marple smiled, her quiet village hers again, its peace restored, its truth shining like the chalice on the altar.